Hello, and welcome back to Factorio. I am Dorthek, and this is episode 25 of our Factorio 0.17 tutorial walkthrough Let's Play game. In the last episode, we built the blue science array, which allowed us to produce the blue science packs, the chemical science packs. We have fed this into our lab array, and we have set to research our first blue required science, the advanced oil processing. It's going very fast, it's just about done. There's been virtually no time between the episodes, and that means we can go work on setting up advanced oil. In the meanwhile, we can start on some of our next researches. I tend to always go with lab research speed when it's available. Now it's a much longer research. You can see that, say, this one requires 50 packs, whereas this one requires 250. But since it improves the speed of every other research, we might as well grab that. And then the one after that will also be available. So let's start that and get to work on our advanced oil refinery. Okay, and here we are at our oil facility. While on the way here, I stopped by to get some materials that we will need. And as you can see, lab research speed finished. So we will grab the next one. These are going quite quickly. And the reason we want lab research speed is if we look at our bonuses button, you can see over here, our research speed is currently plus 90%. So we're researching twice as fast as almost twice as fast as the recipe would otherwise show, which is pretty nice. Now, the other thing I noticed is, you may recall, when we were building this, I built this buffer tank, then 2 spaces and 2 more tanks. And I was doing that for a reason. However, that reason doesn't really apply anymore. This was important before Factorio put in the changes to basic oil. So we needed this set up in the old days. We do not need it now. So what we will do is we will take this pump and drop it here in place of these 2 pipes. That's why there were 2 to allow space for pumps. But we didn't really need to do this in the first place. So we will power it. And this will just slowly drain out these 2 tanks. Now, all 3 tanks are totally full right now, which is great. You can see we are at almost 75,000 petroleum because we're producing it faster than we're using it up. That's nice. All right, so grabbing another oil refinery. Previously, we were using basic oil processing. We now have advanced oil processing. So there's a couple of things you will notice. First off, we now have a second input tube for water. And second, we now have 3 outputs. We still have petroleum, but we also have light oil and heavy oil. And they're produced in various amounts. So this takes in 50 water and 100 crude oil and outputs 25 heavy oil, 45 light oil, and 55 petroleum gas. So we're going to upgrade this whole line to advanced oil processing. So we're going to need to bring in water. We previously brought it in here for use in production of sulfur, and we could just tap into that line, but I would prefer to have a separate feed for this, just so that we're not overloaded. So let's start building these out. Now you'll notice that I'm not yet switching out the refineries because I'd like them to keep working. We are doing science again, which means we want to maintain our production. And I don't want to hook up this pipe until we have switched them over, because the current version of Factorio is very nice in that it prevents you from accidentally mixing fluids that you don't want to mix, but it does so by preventing you from connecting pipes in some situations. So to avoid that, having to build the pipes and then delete the pipes, I'm just doing this. We will put in those last ones at the very end. Oh. Oh, that was fine. And similarly, I'm not going to yet hook up these outputs to our output buses here, because that's not needed right now. All right, let's go get some more water. And I think the water can come in right here. And we will probably bring it in on a similar line as we had before. Let's see. This water came in this way. Yeah, we can put another water pump right near it. And we finished lab research speed 2. We cannot yet do the next lab research speed because that requires purple science, which we're a long way from. So let's work on our actual useful sciences here. And we're going to start with lubricant because that's part of our oil field, and we're going to implement that very soon as part of these science upgrades here. So I am going to run this right next to it. And really should be more careful of trains than I am being. Alright, and lubricant finished. Let's see what we've got. Electric engines are an important element in a lot of our upgrades, including the all-important robots, and the reason we couldn't do them before is because one of the ingredients is lubricant, which we will be making. Let's see, is there anything more urgent here? Before we do electric engines, let's do mining productivity. Mining productivity is a really nice one. It's, again, you can see in the bonuses what it does. It's currently at plus 10%. We're going to add another 10%. The reason we like it is not because it makes the mining machines go faster, but because it means it's actually getting more material out of the same ore patch. So the ore patch may only have 100 pieces of ore, but with mining productivity 1, we're actually going to get 110 pieces of ore out of it, which is really quite nice. And is a way to help manage scarce resources. Don't need those anymore. Okay, and I don't have the materials for another pump, so I'll be right back while I grab that. There we are. So we can place a pump right here, which requires a little bit of snaking of pipes, but not too terribly bad. Just so that we're able to walk back there if needed. Alright, we have water. Let's head back to the refinery. Alright, now that we have water here, let us switch over our plants to advanced oil. And we will shift right click, shift left click, run it across. And as you can see, they're shutting down as we do that because they're not getting their inputs. But all we need to do to get their inputs going is to add this bit of pipe. And now, as you can see, because it's expecting water and it has water, we have no problem putting in this pipe. If we'd put that in first, it might have given us trouble. Now, there's something that's very important that's about to happen, and I'm purposefully letting it happen because it's a key aspect of oil, of advanced oil. It used to be a problem, a much bigger problem with basic oil. Now it applies to only in advanced oil. And I think in Vanilla Factorio, this may be the only place where we run into this, but if you ever decide to play with mods, this is a very, very common mechanism in many modded recipes. You'll notice that the plants have shut down. Well, how come? There's plenty of crude oil, there's plenty of water. They've got plenty of inputs. What's going on? Why did it stop? Well, it stopped because the outputs for heavy oil and light oil are full. Now, the petroleum is fine because we have the pipes hooked up and being used. But a key thing to know in Factorio, especially here in oil processing, is when you have multiple outputs, if you block any one of those outputs, it'll block the whole machine. The machine will not keep making petroleum unless we take away the heavy oil and the light oil. And that's one of the things that makes oil complicated for many people. Now here we're hooking up our heavy oil outputs, So heavy oil is happy, it's going into these pipes, but we still have the problem with light oil. So now, as soon as we connect the light oil pipes, you can see the machines start to work. Now, we need to... Oh, this is going to be problematic. So there's heavy oil going off into this tank. And light oil we're going to have to be a little bit more creative with. I take that back. See, that's the problem. Now I need to delete out these because I actually realized I want light oil in that tank. And once a pipe has one type of ingredient in it, it will not let me put in a different ingredient. So there was still some somewhere in the pipeline. And yes, this means I just wasted a tiny amount of heavy oil. That's okay. Mining productivity is finished. The next one is not available. Let's grab inserter capacity bonus. This will add to how fast our inserters swing. Again, useful. I would like this line. Let's see, this is going to be cracking. Alright. So I want this one here. And you will see why in just a minute. So this tank will be light oil, which means heavy oil. Oh, that's actually perfect. That's even better than I was planning. That tank is heavy oil. And while we're at it, we're going to take our green wires and hook up these tanks. So now, if we mouse over this hole, we can see that we have 97,000 raw oil, 64,000 petroleum, 4,500 light, 1,400 heavy. Very handy. So now we've got it back up and running, and you can see all the oil, light, and heavy oil have gone away, and it's actually the petroleum that's building up because we can only use up the petroleum but so much, which is fine. If we're backed up on both plastic and sulfur, there's really no reason to use up oil. The problem, however, is right now we're not using light and heavy for anything, so sooner or later we're going to fill these tanks, and then we're again going to run out of petroleum. Generally speaking, in Factorio, you're using petroleum far more than any of the other things. Inserter capacity bonus is done. I don't really see anything else that is immediately helpful, so let's just start working down the list. Electric engines. So if we were to allow this to run for a while, we would eventually run out of space in the light and heavy oil tanks, and the whole production system would stop. So how do we fix that? You know what? I was right. This is somewhat problematic. We need to shift this. We need to shift this because we want to be able to continue these pipelines on. Electric engines, robotics. So if we look at our advanced oil recipe that we researched before, you can see that in addition to the advanced oil processing itself, we've got a recipe for cracking heavy oil to light oil and a recipe for cracking light oil to petroleum. We also got the ability to make solid fuel from heavy oil and from light oil. As I mentioned before, if you go to the Factorio cheat sheet, you will see that there's a ratio here of 8 to 2 to 7. So if we build one of these chemical plants, we can set its recipe to crack heavy oil to light oil. It takes as input water and heavy oil, and it outputs light oil. Well, that's handy. Let's build this out. So there's our heavy oil. Normally I would draw it from the pipeline, but we're so close that it's fine. In fact, we're probably closer than I'd ideally like, but that's okay. Worker robot speed, sure. We don't have worker robots yet, but we might as well. I'm just going in cost order. So we're going to want, just as usual, power pole, light, light, and output, output. Now, we're going to output this onto our light oil pipeline. This is why we did not want a pump at over here, because sometimes the oil goes in, sometimes it goes out. That's done. The next thing is lasers. Again, we're not going to need that for a bit. And what the Factorio cheat sheet tells us is that if we have 8 of these, we need only 2 of these to make things work. However, that's relying on the ratio being exactly right, which I don't really like to do. So what we're going to do is we're going to make this a more intelligent system. First off, we need to bring in water. For this, we can tap into this water pipeline. So this will just work. And if the ratio is just right, then this will take in heavy oil and output light oil, which will go back in the system, and we can watch over here as we slowly increase the amount of light oil versus heavy oil. But what if we want heavy oil? We don't always want to get rid of heavy oil, because heavy oil actually is used for some production. So rather than feeding it directly like this, what we're going to do is this. We are going to take a pump and place it right here. And we're going to connect this pump to our circuit network. And for the moment, we're going to leave this recipe alone. We will get back to this one in a moment. And we're going to use this pump as a valve. You can see right now it's not pumping. There's a little red light. The thing's not moving. And these guys will stop as soon as the heavy oil in the pipes is used up. Now, on the output, we can add a pump. It's actually a fairly useful thing to have. But this pump we do not want controlled. We're just using this pump to pull all the oil out of here and shove it into our light oil bus as quickly as possible. This one we will set a recipe for. So this is not our final recipe, but for now, we're going to say we want you to turn on, right? Enabled condition means the pump turns on, so thereby turning on this string. We want to turn this on if heavy oil is greater than light oil. Well, right now we have 1.2 thousand heavy oil and 19,000 light oil, so it's certainly not more. So this just will not run. We're going to stockpile heavy oil. Let's see. Braking force is nice. This increases how rapidly the trains can brake, which actually allows them to accelerate faster, more, and go faster, because the trains know how hard they have to brake to stop at their next station or crossing, so they will only accelerate as fast as they need to. Now, over here, we're going to set light oil cracking to petroleum. And as you can see, it's very similar. Takes in water, outputs petroleum, takes in water and light oil, outputs petroleum. So we're going to do basically the same exact thing, except with this recipe. Now, our ratio from the spreadsheet will tell us that we need 7 of these. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Again, we're using the ratio as a starting point to know how many machines to build, but we're not actually controlling this based on the ratio. We're controlling this based on the pump setup, which means if we get to a point and say, we keep getting too much heavy oil, it's backing up, this system's not running, we need to get rid of more heavy oil. Well, all we have to do is take this, add a few more. It's much more effective that way, because we're not relying on everything being just right. Instead, we're measuring what actually is and using that reality. And I'm out of undergrounds. That's unfortunate. Underflows. That's unfortunate. I will fill these in and then go and grab some more. That's all of those. And we got all of those. Be right back. Okay. Next, we have electric energy distribution 2. This lets us make substations, which are very nice, but not strictly necessary quite yet. All right. Now, we're going to set this up in exactly the same way. We're going to put in a pump that runs from here to the light oil pipeline. And we're going to connect it to the nearest power pole, and we're going to connect that upstream. And the output of this, we will again use a pump for output, and we will connect it to our petroleum pipeline. Now, let's set this initial recipe to very similar to the one we had before. If light oil is greater than petroleum, that's not really going to happen until we get rid of these extra 2 tanks. And they are dropping down. You can see this tank is at 25, but because this is constantly pumping, these have dropped to 10 each. So once we use those tanks up, things will be better. We're going to play with these numbers in just a bit. And I just realized we need one more pipeline that I forgot about. Okay, fortunately we have space right here. So we want one more tank, also connected by green, which we're gonna place here. But not there, no. It needs to go right here. And this is the line that we're using for power poles, but that's okay, because the underflows can coexist with the power poles. And that will come out somewhere here. All right, we will see what that is in just 1 second. So now we're going to make one more thing. So these 2 I've shifted to the left because I want to leave space for the pumps. I'm going to do the same thing here just for consistency's sake, although these arrays don't start like that. That's fine. So here we're going to make lubricant. Lubricant, as we saw, is needed for electric engines, and electric engines are needed for robots and a whole bunch of other stuff. And the ingredient is just heavy oil, so it's really quite simple. Let's see. We can research construction robots. We're not going to build them quite yet, but we can certainly start the research. Now, the nice thing is, because this only has one type of input and one type of output, we don't need to space them quite as far apart. But we're going to anyway, because there's really no good reason not to. We have plenty of space. And to start with, we're going to make, I don't know, let's make 4. There's no specific ratio here, it depends on how quickly we use up this resource. Okay, so the input is, I just get stuck there. The input is heavy oil, which comes in on this pipeline right here. We can do personal roboports. That's a good thing. And the output is going to be on that new line of ours. Of course, this guy's right where I need him to be. We will just do this. And now, in addition to everything else, we have lubricant in our system. Now, lubricant is literally the only use we have for heavy oil. Nothing else requires heavy oil that we want to use. So what we're going to do is come up here and we're going to change this recipe. We're going to say if our lubricant is greater than, let's say, 5,000, then go ahead and crack the rest of the heavy oil. Because if we have a stockpile of lubricant, there's no reason to not just crack the rest of the heavy oil. Now this is not getting heavy oil for some reason. Let's see what's going on. This is not running because it's got too much heavy oil. Oh, we never hooked up this output. We missed. Haha. Oh, that's funny. Yeah, because we didn't miss, we had to change the way this one is set up. There we go. Got a little bit tight in here, so now we've got the heavy oil coming into here. So now the lubricant plants are up and running. And let's extend this green line just so we have it anywhere we want. And now the lubricant is building up, and we will see as soon as that lubricant gets up to 5, this pump will kick in and start cracking our heavy oil. Personal roboports, worker robot speed, sure. Okay, logistic robots. We will discuss robots in great detail a little bit later. So let's pause for a moment and wait for time to advance a bit again. And here we go. We're now at 4.9 thousand lubricant, and as soon as it hit 5, that plant comes on. Now notice that the lubricant is still going. We didn't turn off lubricant production. We've just diverted some of the heavy oil into cracking, which means if you look at the data there, our quantity of heavy oil is dropping through the floor, and that may starve our lubricant production some, but that's okay because it'll get priority. Over here, we are still off because we still have a lot more petroleum than we do light oil, and that's okay. We will stockpile light oil for a little bit. We will do something with it in the next episode. Let's start character logistic trash slots, because that's great. And with that, you now know everything you need to know to upgrade your oil to advanced oil, set up cracking, and set up lubricant production, which is going to be an essential ingredient as we move forward. And we're going to run that all the way down because lubricant is one of the things we're going to put on our bus in the next episode. Character logistics slots 1. So why don't you go ahead and try one of these yourselves? And if you're enjoying these episodes, please consider hitting the like button at the bottom and subscribing to the channel. That way you'll get notifications, and the channel will be a little bit more visible, so more folks that may want this kind of tutorial will be able to find it. With that, as always, don't forget to save.